Hello, this is Mike. I'm going to put up for your enjoyment today an audio clip from Greg Koukl, a Christian apologist, on his radio show Stand to Reason. And this clip has to do with the rationale that atheists give for morality, which is, of course, one of the big issues, and in particular that Christians and theists will challenge atheists on, and how can you justify or ground morality. In this particular instance, he's answering a question from a Christian who is asking him what are some of the reasons that atheists have given for understanding morality or justifying morality. And so I think Koukl does a great job of answering why these reasons, the ones he has heard, don't work. And he has debated a number of famous atheists himself, so he has some really good answers, and he's even written a book on the subject. I recommend you check out his show, Stand to Reason, str.org. I'll put the link down below in the comments section. So enjoy.
My question to you is, what arguments, one or two of them, maybe one or a couple, have atheists, new or old, employed creatively or otherwise to suggest that there is any reason that we should adopt any moral system whatsoever? In other words, how do you prevent absolute anarchy?
Yeah, well, there's actually a couple of strategies they've used. And, for example, one strategy is to say and this is common, let's see, Christopher Hitchens used this, and so did Michael Shermer in my debate with him a few years back. They want to affirm objective morality. In fact, Michael Shermer affirmed it vigorously. But then when I asked where did morality come from, he said, along with Christopher Hitchens in so many words, morality comes from evolution and from society, kind of the social contract. So there's a kind of biological evolution and there's a cultural evolution, both which contribute to the social contract. So you and I, Scott, we just make an agreement. We're going to work in a certain way with each other because we think if we don't do that, then we're not going to survive well. All right?
That's different than what Schaeffer called arbitrary law, though.
Schaeffer calls what?
Schaeffer called it arbitrary law.
It's not entirely arbitrary because it's tied to a goal, and that goal is for our mutual benefit and survival. I know what Schaeffer meant by it, though. He meant that it's not an objective law; it is a subjective law. And this is the first thing that's really, and this is hard to communicate with some people. Especially Michael Shermer, 3 hours of discussing this on the air, and he still thought I was misrepresenting his view. But what I was saying to Michael Shermer is, if you think that morality is a result of Darwinian evolution or social evolution, then the morality that you're talking about cannot be objective morality. It is subjective morality because in both cases the origin of the moral rules are from the subject, whether it is the culture that makes its decision in a social contract or whether it is the trick of biology to make subjects believe there's right and wrong when there isn't. And, so he's not answering your question. Go ahead, sorry.
Yeah, like you said, one of your videos, why shouldn't you torture babies for fun?
Yeah. Exactly. There is no, well, and if you come up with a practical answer, you'll get arrested. Well, then you're just talking about an answer based on power and pragmatism. You're not talking about an answer based on morality. So one of their strategies is to try to seize objective morality for themselves illicitly. The 20th century and 19th century atheistic philosophers did not do this. They understood that if there was no God, there was no basis for morality, and therefore, and also the early Darwinists too, the law of the claw, whatever is right. And so the survival of the fittest and social Darwinism, the whole thing followed. So that's one technique. The other technique that they use is they try to they want to say, well, we have an objective standard of morality. So they try to get around this problem in a different way. Truly objective, as long as we can show that our moral principles accomplish the goal that we're after, then we could say we have an objective standard for accomplishing the goal. For example, I might say that the right way, let me just think of an illustration here. The right way to fuel your automobile is with gasoline and not Wesson oil.
Okay.
Okay, so they'll say, see, we have a right. It's an objective standard, and this is the right thing to do. But what they'll say here, I say use the car as an illustration, but people like Sam Harris will say, well, we want human flourishing. What's good for human beings? And we can see what helps that flourishing, diminishes pain and suffering, and what decreases flourishing. And so now we have an objective standard. Now, and we call these things right. But I want to make an observation. When you say, for example, that it's right to put gasoline in your car and wrong to put Wesson oil in your car, you are not using the term morally. You are using the word functionally or pragmatically, or philosophers would say in a consequentialist way. You're just talking about what accomplishes your purpose. You're not saying what's good or bad in the moral sense, what is virtuous or as vice. You're just talking about what gets you what you want. That's pragmatism. And so when Sam Harris says we have an objective system of morality, and that's human flourishing, he is presuming that human flourishing is a moral good to begin with. And what grounds that presumption? That there shouldn't be suffering. Why not? So he is smuggling morality in the back door, and then he's assuming a moral good that's at home in our worldview, but not at home in his worldview. And then he's saying, okay, how do we get that? Well, we got very practical methods by which we can accomplish that, and those are objective methods. So we've come up with objective morality. No, you haven't. You've come up with pragmatism to an end, and then you've assigned a moral value to the end, which you have no right to do in your system.
Yeah. Yeah, I still think, at the end of the day, the burden of proof for objectivity in its ultimate sense, it still lays on them, and I don't think they've worked it out.
No, they haven't at all. And notice in both of the strategies I characterized, neither of them turn out to be an explanation of objective morality. That is, where bona fide moral qualities inhere in certain actions or behaviors. You know, the first strategy is completely subjectivistic, the biological human evolution thing, and also the cultural evolution, the Rousseau's social contract kind of thing. Notice, by the way, even in a social contract, you have to assume the obligation to keep your word in the contract.
Yeah, that's
so
the
they're
thing.
smuggling in.
I think they have trouble keeping a univocal code for those ethics. I mean, obviously they align on a lot of those things, and so there is, just because of the ilk of that community, I think they're going to align more than not align. But
well, let me tell you what they're onto, and let me make this the last comment because I think the music's coming up in a second. But let me tell you what they're onto. They are onto reality. They know morality is real because they are human beings made in the image of God. I'll develop this more in the next segment at the opening comments, but they know morality is real. They cannot get away from it. And so they are doing their darndest to try to explain it without bowing to God, and the best they can do is this other nonsense. Their awareness of morality is sound. Where they think morality came from is foolishness. And all because they don't want to acknowledge the grounding of morality, God himself, to whom they owe obeisance, to whom they should bow their knee.
So after listening to Greg talk about morality there, I would be curious on your reflections. If you are an atheist in particular, I'd be curious to hear your reflections upon that. Do you think that morality can be grounded in something objective, that you can say there is a right and wrong that everyone should follow? If not, how do you organize society? In other words, what would be organizing principles that you say, well, okay, maybe there isn't an objective morality, but we can still live in a certain way, and we can still have expectations on people to behave according to certain patterns, that sort of thing. And what do you do with the person who chooses not to behave that way? How do you handle those situations? So thought that'd make it for an interesting discussion. Love to hear your responses. God bless.